in this session. I know there's a lot of conflicting things going on, but today we're going to talk about digital payments and mobility. So it's really cool, and we'll explain a little bit what that means as we go forward, and especially in transportation. We want to discuss transportation use cases, how payments, digital collaboration, and analytics are critical to the success of mobility. Lastly, we want to discuss North Carolina Turnpike's action plan and how we move into the future of payments. So today, we have a great panel. I'm really excited to have them here. We have Manali Shah, Google Head of Industry Solutions. Manali is the Strategic Business Executive for the public sector of Google. She leads the creation of mobility, sustainability, and equity solutions leveraging Google's analytics and AI capabilities to address the needs of the public sector's agencies. She is the chair of the board of directors for ITS America and serves as DOE's Smart Mobility Executive Advisory Board and the University of Michigan's Transportation Research Institute and Advisory Board. So great, welcome. Right? Andy Taylor from MasterCard. So director of urban mobility. Andy Taylor is a global transportation expert with 30 years of diverse experience ranging from air traffic management, to mobility as a service, which is a big buzzword in tolling anyway, to road user charging and tolling. Andy is educating user communities and transit agencies globally on the true benefits and impacts of mobility as a service and the importance of sharing pertinent data, improving operational performance, and considering payment solutions. So, and then last but not least, Lauren Alflin is from Slack, a Solution Engineer Director. Lauren, Director of Slack's Public Sector Solutions and Engineering team. She brings 10 years of public experience throughout her time at Slack and Oracle. She joined Slack 5.5 years ago, well before public sector vertical existed at Slack. But her background in supporting public sector at Oracle drove her passion to the customer base. So welcome, to the great panel. So as you can see, we're going to talk about the future mobility. The future mobility isn't coming, it's here. Digital payments aren't coming, they're here. And we'll show you some examples of that as we move forward. So let's start by looking at a video. So the first video is from Apple, and it's talking about the transformation that we've seen in the car. So anybody that's bought a vehicle in the past, probably 7-8 years, you're seeing a lot of technology coming into the car now. So like if you have a car that you can open with your cell phone, right, you're connected. You may not know you're connected, but you're connected. So, and it's now with Apple and the payment systems coming into the car, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it's becoming more and more prominent. So let's start the video.
CarPlay is the smarter, safer way to use your iPhone in the car and has fundamentally changed the way people interact with their vehicles. It's available on over 98% of cars in the US. What's more, 79% of US buyers would only consider a car that works with CarPlay. It's a must-have feature when shopping for a new vehicle. Our users love CarPlay. It gives them an easy way to use apps in the car, using the familiar UI from their iPhone. But cars have changed a lot, with larger sized screens and more of them throughout the car. There's an opportunity for iPhone to play an even more important role. We've been working with automakers to reinvent the in-car experience across all of the driver's screens. Let's take a sneak peek at this next generation of CarPlay. There's so much to explore here. Let's take a closer look. This next generation of CarPlay provides content for all the driver's screens. giving an experience that is unified and consistent. It's the very best of both your car and your iPhone, and it goes beyond what you can do with CarPlay today. Deep integration with the car's hardware lets you tune your car's radio or change your temperature without ever leaving the CarPlay experience. It also includes widgets powered by your iPhone that fit your screens perfectly. They can live front and center in the gauge cluster as well, giving you information at a glance. In fact, this next generation of CarPlay powers your entire instrument cluster. To do this, your iPhone communicates with your vehicle's real-time systems in an on-device, privacy-friendly way, showing all of your driving information like speed, RPMs, fuel level, temperature, and more. And no matter what type of unique screen shapes or layouts you may have, this next generation of CarPlay feels like it was made specifically for your car. We're also excited to give you the ability to make the core of the driving experience unique to you. We carefully crafted instrument cluster options ranging from the modern to the traditional that use different colors, dial treatments, backgrounds, and layouts to provide various looks and feels. You can choose different curated themes and styles for your gauges. And automakers from around the world are excited to bring this new vision of CarPlay to customers. This is just a taste of what the next generation of CarPlay will bring. Vehicles will start to be announced late next year, and we can't wait to show you more further down the road. And now, I'll hand it back to Craig.
So as you can see, not only has technology taken over in the last couple of years, the leap forwards we're going to see in the next couple of years is just amazing. I remember when I was young, I was lucky to have an oil gauge to make sure my car didn't run out of oil when I was a kid. But now you can configure everything the way you want it, and bring in all the social media and stuff in your phone. It's really going to be amazing. I have a second video that kind of pulls together the payment systems in the vehicle. It was put together by SiriusXM back a couple years ago. I was actually a judge at CES, and they presented it out there. So I've actually ridden in one of their cars, so this isn't technology that they're playing with. This is technology that's here. They're actually running it as pilot, I think, in Florida. So with that, do you want to start the Sirius video?
What's the quickest way to Yuriko's house?
10 minutes via the freeway.
Perfect.
Low fuel. Would you like to get gas?
Let's make it quick.
$37 to fill up.
Fill up.
Okay, rerouting now. Fill up at pump 6.
I need coffee. Take it to the nearest coffee shop.
There's a coffee shop nearby.
Order 4 large coffees.
Okay, your total is $12.
Pay now. Hey. Ooh, where are we gonna park? Find available parking.
There's a garage nearby. Spot 268 is available. Redeem points for VIP passes.
So as you can see, it's not just payment for tolling or any one area. It's the combination, and I call it cross-marketing between all of them. You know, here we've got gas, we've got paid a toll, got coffee, got paid back for the coffee, got tickets, and then got upgraded to the conference in order to go in and go in as a VIP. So, and it's, you know, the possibilities are just limitless in what's going to happen with the digital payment systems. So it's moving forward. You know, connected vehicles wirelessly transmit data constantly. Every 3 seconds or less, you're getting updates and all kinds of information that include, you know, location, occupancy, and much more. It can be used for mobility and safety, for instance. The safety systems that are in cars now, from the driver detection, the automatic braking, and now everything else that's happening, is amazing. So how big is the connected vehicle market? How big does everybody think it is? To give you an idea, there's about 240 million vehicles in the United States right now, right? So about how many connected vehicles right now today can wirelessly transmit data and mobility payments in the United States? And I'll give a range. I have three potential numbers here, and then we'll do a show of hands. 30 million, 60 million, or 100 million. So how many think there's 30 million out of that 240 million connected today? 1, 2, 3, 4, a couple. All right, 60 million. About half, all right. 100 million? So the answer is it's 100 million, and it's growing exponentially every year. Basically, 9 out of 10 vehicles delivered in the United States today to customers are connected. So it's you know, it's not coming, it's here. And I'll give you another example. Actually, this came from a session yesterday. Somebody was talking about the generational shift and how do we deal with the generational shift today. And they mentioned their 5-year-old lost a tooth, right? And they said, oh, the tooth fairy will be coming, and you got to get to sleep so the tooth fairy can come. And then this young lady said, uh-oh, and she went down to her husband and said, do we have any cash in the house, right? We pay everything with, you know, digital payments right now. And then she got thinking, she said, you know, for my 5-year-old, she's never, ever held or saw cash, because since she was little, every place we went, we used a digital payment system. So we're not going there. We're kind of here, at least in the younger generation. So how do we get there on the vehicle side? How do we get there on this side? So, so trends and experience, you know, peer-to-peer payments and non-car payments are increasing. You know, not only for the younger generation, even my generation. I could talk about the older generation on that side. Customers prefer the digital channels and self-service. We're seeing more and more of that, not only online, but everywhere. You know, data was the new oil, now the new practice on that side. So we have a couple case studies and scenarios to go today to discuss in transportation cases. And we're not going to play 110 slides. Everybody's just going to talk between each other and make it an open discussion. We have, as I said, we have great panelists that are all working on this in one way or another. So we want to move forward with that. So we'll get right into it with case study number 1. So Samantha wants to get to the beach on a busy holiday weekend. Samantha wants to use an e-scooter to get to a zip car to drive to the beach early because traffic is going to be really heavy on this holiday weekend. She stops along the way to get food and gas and then has a problem with her e-scooter and needs to get it resolved. So Manali, you want to take a shot at discussing the trip discovery and planning?
Sure. Yeah, you know, when you think about a scenario like this, it's really about getting to a destination in the easiest way and without friction, right? That's what, from our individual experiences when we're traveling, we're trying to figure out what's the best way to get somewhere, what are the options, what's happening in real time, and surface that up. And so, you know, the way that we think about it, if you think about things like Google Maps, you know, we're integrating all these different modes of transportation and real-time information to help consumers and travelers make choices based on what their needs are, what their context is, and what's happening around them. And so as we think about these things, there's more and more that continues to get added to these experiences, right? It's different modes, taking scooters, taking rideshare, taking driving, transit, all these different modes of transportation that are getting integrated. And then there's also information around things like pricing, right? So we've done things like integrate toll pricing. And so you have more transparency around the different options that you have as a traveler. But the idea is really to make it seamless and easy and to be able to understand what those choices are along the way. And so I think that as JJ sharing that vision is really to take that and integrate the payment side of it. Like, how do we really think about making that next set of experiences even easier across the different modes? So we're bringing things in like transparency around prices, but then how do we take it to that next level? And the other aspect to think about is just where you are in terms of your journey. Are you doing this on a mobile device? Are you doing this in the vehicle? And as JJ mentioned, like the vehicles are already connected. Like Android Auto is already in 100 million vehicles. And so those experiences and those platforms are already there and available and ready to consume different types of data and information that make it easier for the consumer to create that frictionless experience. So we'll get into some of the ways, in some of the next use cases of how we look at it from the agency perspective, but just wanted to start with that traveler experience.
Great, thank you. Andy, do you want to talk about secure payments?
Yeah, I can start with secure payments, but it's annoying how organized Samantha is that she likes to plan ahead, obviously. She's obviously, I'm assuming that she's already got her e-scooter all registered, and she's downloaded the app, and she's loaded it with her credentials, and she's done all of this stuff. And because that's my one big issue. It's like I turned up in Raleigh yesterday, and it's, there's scooters scattered everywhere, and it's like it's not the one that I've got on my app. Or there's the bikes, and it's not the one that I've got on my app. So on my phone. So it's a case of now I've got to go through that hassle of registering. And that's another barrier to entry. That's another thing that's stopping you getting there. So what we've been doing as well at MasterCard is looking at what we call Move ID. So it's a credential that basically has your identity in there. It has your sort of concessions in there as well. So if you're a student, if you're a senior, if you're a child, it gives you if you've got a driving license, you can register your driving license with it as well. So now you can use that Move ID to basically register into any of the apps. It's just a one click and you're in. You don't need to worry about getting your 16-digit sort of MasterCard number out, or putting in your name and address, or taking photos of your driving license. It's there to try and simplify the process from day one. So that's the first hurdle, getting you over that. So the next thing is, how do we sort of make it easier? How do we make it secure? Well, there's a bike share scheme in Europe called Free Bike, which gets away with any of this sort of ID verification piece as well, just trying to make it as open and accessible. So now you can literally just go and tap your contactless bank card on the bike, and it'll unlock and you can go. And then when you finish, you tap the brake twice, and that's it. It figures out how much it needs to charge you and sends it to the system. So it's about simplification. It's about creating that environment where it's easier to say yes to mobility options instead of saying, nah, forget it, I'll jump in the car and do it that way instead. So that's what we've been sort of working on, is how you sort of simplify it. And that goes down into the different applications that you have as well. So if you do have these multiple applications where you've registered all your sort of information, we have a system called Click to Pay, which is like a secure methodology of taking any credit card and just, it's one click and it's in there. It uses all of the sort of EMV sort of standards and certifications to make sure it's secure. It's sort of robust network that's used over sort of multiple different devices. So you can use it on your web browser, you can use it on your mobile application. There's no reason why you can't put it in CarPlay and Android Auto as well, just to sort of click to pay for that as well. So it's about sort of creating that sort of seamless environment, making sure it's secure, and giving confidence to the actual consumer that this is a solution that they want to use, and their information and their data and their money is going to be safe and secure. I think one of the things that we often, all of us, overlook is, we're trying to make it easier for North Carolina DOT. We're trying to make it easier for the Turnpike. We're trying to make it easier for the transit system. Make it easier for the user. That's the key thing at the end of the day.
Great. Lauren?
Yeah, so on the topic of real-time feedback, I really feel for Samantha in this scenario because I was Samantha just a few weeks ago when I took an e-scooter for the first time. I was running late for dinner to meet up with some friends about a mile away, and I walked out my front door, and there happened to be a scooter just sitting right there. So I figured, this is great, going to be an easy and fast way to get there. So I download the app, upload my payment pretty quickly, and I'm thinking I'm going to be there in about 2 minutes. Well, turns out it's a lot harder to actually start and ride those things than I expected them to be. And a moment of panic set in where I realized I didn't know what I was doing on this thing, and I started to worry that the high schoolers that lived next door were watching me through the window and making fun of me the whole time. So I'm trying to get this sorted out as quickly as possible so as not to embarrass myself. And in the app, most of these applications provide some kind of options for troubleshooting that you can follow along with. And in my scenario, I wasn't able to resolve the issue right away using the various troubleshooting options they immediately had available. And so I think when we're thinking of these various different modes of travel that are available to people like Samantha, if we're going to convert someone like her to a returning user and returning customer, that customer experience in those initial moments of first using the service are so pivotal to getting her to actually come back and use that mode of transportation again. And I was very fortunate in that scenario that even though the immediate troubleshooting options did not resolve my current panicked state, they were able to pretty quickly connect me with a customer service representative who very clearly had a strong picture of everything going on in my situation. So everything from my user profile to details about my location, the actual scooter that was registered to me in that moment. And by bringing all of that data together in a central location, I didn't have to provide all of that in real time and actually share my troubles over the phone to further embarrass myself. That agent already had all of that information readily available to them and were able to help me sort this out very quickly so that I could just embarrass myself by riding the scooter poorly at that point. But I think, that customer experience perspective, being able to combine all of these different data sources about your customer, about your inventory, like the scooters in this scenario, in a central location in a place like Slack or another collaboration tool is so critical to being able to provide the best possible user experience and ultimately, hopefully, bring that person back as a returning customer.
That's great. Any comments between the group? I have one. So we have a payment system, mapping system, and try to explain to everybody how to use it. How difficult is it going to be to get the collaboration between the different groups initially to make it happen?
I would say, it's already happening. A lot of this collaboration is already happening, and these integrations are happening. I think the challenge sometimes, I know, like, especially for applications, if you think about things like Google Maps or Android Auto, where it's not like something that can just work in like North Carolina or like one city or one state. It has to work at scale globally. And so that's kind of the bar that we're often talking about. And so the challenge sometimes is in like the fragmentation around, these types of services. If you think of things like even just tolling and getting toll prices, right? Like that in itself for like our maps teams to be able to get that reliable quality data across all these different agencies in the US and across the globe, that's a big endeavor, right? So just that's where kind of the challenge comes in. And if you think about other things like parking or these other types of services that are very kind of fragmented, that kind of integration, I think, is where some of the challenges. But I think some of the things that are happening already is things like, whenever I go to a new city, I always try to take like public transportation and different modes, and I just want to be able to go and take my phone and tap it and be able to get on. And usually I'm like, oh, how do I get this like fare card? And it's complicated, right? Even though I am trying to do the right thing and take these other modes of transportation. And so I think that's the technology is there. It's really like getting to that next level of creating more of these open ecosystems. I think that's where the opportunity lies.
I think the open ecosystems is definitely the way to go. I think being able to sort of share data in a sort of an organized and controlled manner so that you can surface this information to the user is going to be critical to making all of these connections work. I think one of the other things that we need to consider is the user expectations again. Sorry to go back to the user all the time. But I mean, no offense, I've used Google Maps and I use Google Maps all the time on my Apple device. And it's, I use it because I think it's the best solution. Other solutions are available. But it's one of those things where I've used it in San Francisco and it's given me the toll prices and it's given me that. So, I go to the next city and there's an expectation that when I plug it in, I'm going to get the same data again, and I don't, and I get disappointed and I get angry, only for a fraction of a second. But it's like, it's that sort of resistance that sort of needs to be broken down. And then I think the next thing that comes with that is user education. It's, my phone will, bless it, will go and update everything for me overnight and stuff. Next morning, I've got the only thing I know is there's a tiny little blue dot next to the icon that says it's been updated. But I don't know what's changed. It may have been a bug fix, but it's one of those things that I'm going through and you suddenly go, oh, that's new. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that was there, and that could have saved me some grief, or that could have helped me in some particular way. And it's the same with the payment ecosystem as well. There's new payment ways coming on board all the time, but people are creatures of habit. People will do what they do all the time. People will use their sort of Bank of America debit card, or pay with their Amex, or use their Visa for this, or hopefully use your MasterCard here, there, and everywhere. But there's different ways of sort of putting funds between these different organizations. There's different ways of paying for this thing. So it comes down to education, and I think that's a big sort of barrier to overcome as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the open standards here are huge. Even when I drove in from Virginia yesterday, I arrived here downtown, went to go park my car, and I realized the parking app that I have on my phone that I most frequently use doesn't work here. And rather than downloading a new app, uploading all of my payment information, I just texted a picture of my license plate to my colleague over here. Thank you, Reed. But I think we all have so many apps on our phone at this point in time, and the last thing we want to do is have to download a new app every single time we embark on a different type of journey. And so opening up those standards to make it easier for people to set that type of system up one time and be able to use it wherever they might go is so critical to getting people to continue using these services.
And just on about sharing data, it's only yesterday we realized we lived 3 blocks away from each other in Alexandria. So if we'd have shared information beforehand, we could have shared the journey.
Yeah, I agree with a couple things you said here. First, it's not about the agency, the government agency and stuff like that. It's about how we deliver to the customer. And sometimes that's beyond our scope as far as we shouldn't just look at tolling. We should look at how this works for everybody and how this is going to fit into people's lives, right? So, and the data stuff is new to everybody as far as sharing and things like that. So it's really great. So let's move on to use case number 2. Anyway, Kim, I think she's here, right? Anyway, does not own a car, but wants to go to Charlotte for a work meeting and see a favorite band after the work meeting. Friend Jim has a cool car and said that they could use it as long as he got paid for the mileage and expenses. On the way to the concert and after work, they used the car payment system for a coffee shop, car wash, and a gas station before returning the car the next day. So, let's shift to our focus to discuss the perspective of challenges for the next use case in this one. So, do we want to, how do we do real-time pricing incentive? It goes back to the data side. So, Andy, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, sure. So I think this comes back to the use case one, to be honest. I think, we were talking about toll prices and getting that information as part of the planning. I think when you start looking specifically where we live, you've got the I-66 with the dynamic pricing, which sort of comes into play. So you don't know how much you're going to be paying until you actually start using the road. So it's that incentivization and sort of changing people's behaviors through varying the price is one mechanism to sort of control that level of congestion, but at the same time it's about how you can sort of communicate that to the people who need to know it. It's like, I'd like to know before I plan my journey if it's going to cost me $35 to use that bit of the I-66 or whether or not it's going to be $4. It makes a big difference to what I'm going to do. But I think in this instance with Kim and Jim, it's all about sort of being able to sort of share the monies back at the end of the day. So if Kim's been using the car and, rocking up at Starbucks and buying coffees and lattes for everybody after the band or whatever, and they've done the parking and that's been connected, it's about how you can quickly and seamlessly get that money back to Kim. So there's a solution we have called MasterCard Send, which powers a lot of the money transfer applications that you all got on your phones already. It's there to sort of quickly, in near real time, put the money back into somebody else's account, so people aren't left out of pocket. It's not a case of writing a check anymore and giving it to somebody and then waiting a week for them to cash it and making sure it's come out your account. It's near instantaneous now. But that's great for just like Kim and Jim just sort of sharing the funds. But obviously Kim's been on a wild spree at coffee shops, car washes and gas stations. It's a case of how do you start paying for those other services as well? So it could be that, big organizations like Starbucks, you can have that sort of connected into the system. So it's easy to transfer the funds between one account and the other. But for Bob's coffee shop down the road, where it's just like a one-off usage, where it's, he's not looking at a large sort of virtual engagement and using digital payments. We have things called virtual card solutions as well, which can basically send via a secure email a card number that can then be processed, so it makes it easier. So you're not leaving any of the merchants out of the ecosystem whatsoever. It's like anybody can sort of play in this environment. It's not exclusionary, it's about inclusion of all the available merchants. And then when we start talking about incentives as well, it's this big thing of, and I don't like to pick on public agencies, but it's a case of if you look at the Turnpike, they're interested in getting users on the road and driving the revenue. If you look at the transit agency, they're interested in getting people on the buses and increasing the ridership. And then you've got two very different verticals within the same city who have got conflicting goals. So sometimes this conversation needs to be elevated up to the sort of city level that basically says, okay, all right, we're going to have to play the parents here. We're going to have to basically say, today, because it's like bad environmental conditions, we want less people to use the road, we want more people to use public transportation. So how can we start incentivizing those behaviors? How can we say the dynamic pricing today is going to be X on this particular road, but we're going to reduce public transport by 50%? So it's how we manage that sort of information, how we share that information with the user again, how we get it out there, and how we start looking at things at managing networks, mobility networks holistically. So if you can individualize it and incentivize it for one particular user, when you aggregate that up to all the users on the road network, that you've got a better experience for everybody.
Cool. Lauren?
So as someone who is notoriously bad at doing their expenses, I definitely feel for Kim in this scenario. And I think, when you're taking a journey like this, a multi-purpose journey, the last thing that's on your mind is keeping a detailed diary of all of the different expenses that you made, the mileage you took, and so forth. And you really shouldn't have to, right? Because in this scenario and in the lives that we live today, this data all lives somewhere already. So it shouldn't be incumbent on the driver or the rider to keep a detailed log and history of all of this information that already lives somewhere. So, as Kim is going through his journey and is attending his work meeting, getting coffee, whatever it is that he's doing here, he doesn't want to have to think about all of those different things. And so I think, once he finishes his journey, there are a couple of different ways this could play out to make his life easier and make sure that he can get money back to his friend Jim as quickly as possible. And what we see some of our customers on the Slack side doing is creating simple SMS integrations with their platforms and the Slack ecosystem, where they can actually create a simple 411 type phone number that their users can send a quick text to and ask for this type of information that company or that organization is already maintaining on their behalf. And so if Kim has the ability to send a simple request in at the end of his journey and say, hey, can I get a readout of all of the charges that I made to my friend Jim's car over the last 24 hours, he doesn't have to now be responsible for going back and remembering all of the different places he stopped along the way and likely forgetting one of those different scenarios and shortchanging his friend Jim. And on the back end, within a collaboration system like Slack, the organization responsible for maintaining all of this data will be able to have a really detailed data readout. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the data side of things in a second here. But again, that information already lives within the system. It's already out there. It's just a matter of surfacing it more quickly for that end user so that they can get the most accurate readout of their various expenses and charge some of them to maybe their work account and then pay out of pocket to their friend for their personal expenses.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on like the kind of zoom out a bit and talk about the network side and optimizing the network. Now, Kim probably doesn't really care about optimizing the transportation network. Kim just cares about getting where he needs to go. But I'm going to introduce a new persona, Priya, who's at the Traffic Operations Center, who actually does care about looking at optimizing the network. And this kind of optimization could be around many different factors, right? We, of course, think about congestion and getting people places quickly, but as, for those of you who've been around at this conference, there's other goals too around things like decarbonizing the transportation network, right? There's goals around equity and access. And so when you start to think about optimization, it's really like, what are the different levers and the things that as an agency you're looking to do across the network to really create that optimization? And so, initially we were talking more about the consumer side, but what we're doing now, and as we work with different agencies, we're bringing a lot of these tools that have been developed for our own products in Google, the AI, the analytics, bringing that to the agency experience to create that kind of simplicity and have all the data that is necessary to make decisions around optimizing the different levers that agencies have to be able to affect behavior and travel patterns. And I think we've had some really interesting, over the last few years, we've had some real life experiences and the shifts in travel patterns, right? Through the pandemic, you can see what happens when, people work from home and, these types of different dynamics, you can start to see what the impact is on these travel patterns. And so now we could start to say, hey, we don't need everybody to change their behavior, right? But maybe some small percentage of the population, if we can incentivize them to change their behavior, it can really change the dynamics from a carbon footprint perspective, from a travel time perspective, from a safety perspective. And we have all these analytics now around things like, what are the speeds that people are traveling at? Like now we have the opposite problem, not, things like too much congestion. Sometimes we have excessive speeding going on, and that's causing a lot of safety issues, and fatalities have gone up. And so what are the different types of dimensions that the agency needs to understand, and having access to this data to be able to look at how do I create the right incentives? And the incentives can happen in a number of different ways. It could happen through things like, the Starbucks coffee type of thing, but it could also happen just in smaller nudges, right? In terms of the way the infrastructure is designed, the type of messages that people are receiving, and notifications maybe that they get before they even start their journey. So there's many different ways to think about it, and I think it's exciting because now a lot of that data, the analytics, is available for the agency side as well, not just the consumer.
Yeah, and you hit on something, I think you brought it up, that, agencies tend to live in their own silo, right? And I think that's breaking down a little bit, and it's because of technology. So before, we all had our piece of iron sitting in the corner, and we were worried about, you know, memory and storage capacity, and oh, we can't work with you because it's going to cost us too much, and sharing data. But now, most of the agencies are looking at least at cloud solutions, and as we talked, is, you know, doing this as a service instead of just owning all this iron all over the place and trying to figure it out. So I'm starting to see it open up a little bit, and the data stuff is still a little bit touchy between agencies, but as far as the capability, it's like when we talk about the payment side. The capability's there now. It's just, and when we did EasyPass, the easy part was we thought the hard part would be the hardware. That was the easy part. The hard part was the business rules and trying to make it work. So, you know, I'm hoping that the government agencies, like the corporate agencies, are now working together to make all this happen, you know, for the benefit of the customer. And me as an agency is not the customer. The people who use my road is the customer. You know, tolling is just a tool in the transportation toolbox. It's not always the answer, right? So we don't try to sell just to sell. So working with tolling and transit historically never got along, right? Because we're all applying for the same customer. But you brought up, you know, maybe in some days we should say, don't take the toll road. You know, it's icy, snowing, whatever, you know, take public transit. You know, there's a commuter rail or something like that and drive to that. But I think we're starting to get there, but it's a rather long journey. The basic problem is the money to upgrade the infrastructure and change.
I think sometimes it's not the it's not the infrastructure that needs upgrading, to be honest. You can achieve a lot through simple incentivization that happens today. And it doesn't take a massive amount to change a few people's behaviors, which has a big knock-on effect for everybody else. So MasterCard is just a little aside. We, excuse me, we sponsored a trial up in Chicago with the CTA.
Oh, yeah.
And it's you'll have to help me out because, as you can tell by my accent, I'm not originally from here. What's the ballpark on the red line?
It's Wrigley Field.
There we
yeah,
go.
Yeah.
So,
I'm from Chicago, so
yeah.
I remember this experiment.
So it was a simple thing about if you use the red line, if you registered your mobile phone, you could basically get a text message. The first phase was you get a text message to say there's a ball game on tonight. If you can change your travel patterns, you know, it'd be greatly appreciated. And then that had a certain impact. And then the next thing was, okay, if you change your travel patterns outside these times, we'll give you $1 back. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden the federal agencies for taxation purposes said, no, you can't do that. It's like, and so that became another barrier to overcome. And then it was a case of, well, we'll make a donation to charity on your behalf, I think it was. And that said more about, I think, the people of Chicago, because I think they opted to go more for the cuddly animals over sick children. But finally, CTA basically said, if you shift your journey pattern outside of the time zones, we'll make the journey free for you. And it's amazing what a free journey can do for people. Out of everybody that was registered, it's sort of, I think it was around about 17-18% of the people who registered shifted their journey patterns. Which, if you're a planner on a transit agency, or why can't you extend this to the sort of the road network? That's a massive amount of traffic that you've moved. So the people going to the ball game have a better experience. Mm-hmm. The people who commute have a better experience. Everybody wins, and it's not that big of an impact on your sort of revenue lines if you've shifted that many people, because more people are using the system because they know it's going to be a shared experience. It's going to be better for them, and the same happened down in. The same is happening now down in Australia, where AIG, the big Australian insurance company, is now working with Transport for New South Wales to monitor people's car journeys in the morning. And they are now incentivizing people to not travel at certain times because the chance of having an accident when it's more congested mm-hmm. is like higher. So the insurance company is now paying for free rides on the metro system, or it's giving you free coffees because it knows that its payouts are going to be less because you're traveling at a time that is, for the propensity for an accident is going to be way less. So as soon as you start opening up this ecosystem, it's not just the standard players that you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
everybody starts to recognize that there's a role for them to play in that ecosystem. It's from insurance companies to coffee providers to you know what.
Yep. Cool. Anybody else? Real quick? Huh?
I do want to make one quick comment. You mentioned something really important about kind of coordinating between different government agencies and even between public sector and the private sector. And I think that's so critical to making this a reality. And historically, it's been really difficult for different public sector agencies to connect with one another if they're not on all of the same systems. Even harder when you're talking about public to private partnerships. But we're seeing much more broad adoption now of more real-time collaboration tools between agencies. So we have the ability, on the Slack side, to do what we call Slack Connect. That enables you to extend a bridge of communication in a single channel or multiple channels with partners that you're working with on a regular basis. And we're seeing so much better coordination within state and local governments in particular across different divisions. When we think of this scenario, you have tolling, transportation. If there is an accident, you need to bring kind of the police and emergency services into the mix. And coordinating all of that over phone calls, email, running up and down the stairs of an office building, it's just not efficient enough to accomplish this type of task. And so having that real-time communication channel or platform that enables all of those various different parties to be in that same central triage location on a moment's notice is what's really going to enable us to address these scenarios and push the needle forward.
Terrific. Thank you. We're actually running close to right on time, which is good. So we're going to move into the last use case. For the last use case, we want to discuss how transportation industry can be more inclusive to all travelers. And you touched on it a little bit in some of the other discussions. This use case 3 is a customer who opened a new retail credit card account and received a 30-day unlimited subscription to use the express lanes while visiting family members in town. So, toll roads for a long time have been called, Lexus lanes and everything else, and we're missing a key demographic in providing service. And so, Andy, do you want to start with, how do we do this from an open payments perspective? Or
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the phrase open payments is, in the sort of payment ecosystem, means one very particular thing. But I think in this instance, it really is a case about how you provide more payment options to everybody that sort of needs to travel. I think one of the big issues that we see is diversity in the population. We were discussing yesterday about sort of how certain areas around here have been bought up and redeveloped into million-dollar apartments, and people are being forced out into areas where there's less housing, and they're forced to commute more. They're now using roads which they didn't use before, which now they're going to pay tolls for. So how do we address the needs of the unbanked, the underbanked? How do we address the digital divide? Not everybody has a smartphone or wants to use a smartphone. So it's a case of coming up with all of those solutions and how you can bring those together. And you know what? It's our problem. It's not the consumer's problem about how they want to pay. We should be making it easier for them to sort of use the services and pay for the services. So it's our responsibility to make sure that those different solutions are available. So yes, I do want to be able to just go and tap my contactless bank card and get onto a metro. Yes, I want to be able to register my bank account with my EasyPass account so it automatically tops up on a regular basis. But at the same time, maybe somebody within a city or a region is on benefits, and there's solutions there like sort of prepaid solutions which are tied to specific merchants so that they can only use them in certain areas. So you can have a prepaid solution which is just for use on sort of toll roads or for sort of transit solutions. We have a solution called CityKey which we can use to deliver benefits directly to the actual consumer. And those sort of solutions have, vastly reduced sort of fees associated with them. So the money that they're being given is money they can access, and it's not a sort of an overly burdened sort of experience. But I think it's, like I say, it's beholden on us to make it as simple, to educate the consumer, and to make sure that however they want to pay, they've got the ability to pay for whatever service they want.
cool.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because I think on paper we can probably all agree that express lanes are very expensive. They're much more expensive than regular toll road or taking back roads that don't have any tolling. But oftentimes there's a massive gain in opportunity cost for time by taking those roads. And when someone is given a free 30-day trial, I'm sure we've all been given trials of various different services over the years. And I know I personally almost always just set a timer for myself for that 30 days out and go in and cancel whatever that service is after 30 days. And very rarely do I know or have detailed data on the value that that service provided me during that time that I had access to it for free. And so I think one really important piece to consider here is how are we reflecting back on this individual's experience over the past 30 days to understand what have they actually gained by using this service. If they are someone who was leveraging those express lanes every single day, can we provide them with details around time saved if they had taken alternate routes? Potentially going even a step further, is there an opportunity cost with that time saved of more hours they could have worked or time spent with family, really painting a picture for that consumer of what's been gained for them by leveraging that service over those 30 days. And I think being able to pull all of that data into a centralized location and actually do some analysis as a group and an organization and figure out who should we be targeting to send these metrics out to in order to recommend, you're getting a lot out of this service. This is maybe something that you should consider extending further because look at all that you've gained over the last 30 days. Is kind of one way I think to approach converting that free user into someone who's using the service long term. But I think it could also provide really important data around, is there a demographic that is using this service really heavily when it's being given to them for free, but they simply can't afford it when they're being charged outright for the service? And how can we maybe make that more accessible to this specific demographic based on that data we've collected during this 30-day free trial?
Yeah, and maybe I'll build on that on two things. One on the analytics side, but then I also want to touch on the engagement side. As we think about inclusion, some of the things that we've been doing is really looking at how do you understand not only information about people who are using your services, but the people who, as you said, are not, and maybe whose kind of needs and their voices are not really included in a part of things in the first place. And so I think, part of it is doing those types of analytics, and some of the work that we've been doing. We've created what we call an equity index where we integrate different lenses, things like access to opportunity, access to transportation, impact from things like air quality, safety, all these different lenses to help understand where are the gaps, right? First, we got to understand who are we not reaching, whose voices are not being included, so you can look at where do you target what types of services. The second part of it is around actually engagement. How do you think about engaging people, both in terms of communicating information out, but also understanding needs of different travelers and people who their needs maybe are not the ones that are thought of initially. And so the way that we've approached this, actually through the pandemic, we found that this was a big need, being able to engage, have public services, things like unemployment, public health, right? These agencies that were getting inundated with all kinds of volume that they never had. And we implemented things like virtual agents that could help across different modes of communication, whether it's web, mobile, voice, also thinking about across different languages. And so you really create this ability to interact with people across many different touch points and ways that are natural to them. And I think that's important both for that kind of outbound communication, but also looking at okay, how do we really understand what the needs are of these different constituents in these communities? And so we also have done things like sentiment analytics, where we're understanding things like search trends and social media and what are people's attitudes about these types of things. And so if you're implementing something like this, that potentially will have, maybe some negative consequences on certain populations, that you can start to understand those patterns so that you can think more proactively about how do I implement this in a way that is more inclusive. Or maybe I need to think about a different type of service and a different type of model. So those are just a few examples of different types of ways you can use technology to think about how do you actually engage communities and be more inclusive.
Yeah. Any other comments on the panel?
I was just going to say on the engaging communities piece, there's, and it comes back to sentiment as well. It's the, if you believe that the agency that you're interacting with is acting on your best behalf and giving you the best service that you can possibly get through the feedback that you get through sort of communication, through sentiment analysis, there's more of a propensity for that people to continue to keep using that service. It's, if you look at Transport for London, they basically, if you go and get your contactless bank card and tap onto the subway or the underground, if you tap on the buses, once you've tapped on 3 or 4 times a day, if you've been travelling around London, it stops charging you, because it's a case of, well, if you'd bought a day pass, this is what, that's more effective. And then after 3 or 4 days, if you've been using it constantly, which I do when I'm over there, they'll stop charging you for the rest of the week, because it's a case of, well, if you bought a week pass, we'll look, that would have been more effective. So it's the agency looking out for you on your behalf. It's sort of saying, we've got you back here. We're going to give you the best service. We're going to give you the best option. It's a model that could quite easily be extended to sort of tolling and express lanes as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a case of, if you travel 4 times, you get the 5th day free. Or maybe it's an instance where you try to drive that intermodal experience where if you travel 4 times, maybe we'll give you a free pass to use the public transport on a Friday or something. So there's a lot of options there, and it's down to sharing data. It's about making it easy to access. It's about making it equitable. And it's educating the customer at the end of the day.
Good. Terrific. My CFO's back there going, how much is this going to cost? I could see him.
We can speak later. That's fine.
But you're right. We have to look at what solutions we're providing to the public, right, on our side. Now, obviously, we have to be able to afford it and be, to move forward with that. But, I think it's really important. I mean, in one hand, I told the story about the tooth fairy thing, and everybody's moving to, digital payments and things like that. On the other hand, we're providing service that there's a whole demographic that can't use digital payments because they're unbanked, underbanked. So we're looking at solutions to try to get there on that side. And I know we talked a little bit offline, and I think there may be some answers to that. So, cool. So now the marketing thing from the Turnpike, basically. I'm a big over, under, around, or through person. I like discussions, but I like action much, much better, right? We could talk about things forever, and usually the conversation just dies at some point. So, North Carolina has been, and I'm not just saying this, kind of the leader nationally in pushing things forward. Government in general is conservative and risk adverse. So it always takes somebody to step out front and not get burned in order for somebody else to do it too. We're the most interoperable state in the country. You can use our transponders more than anybody else's in the country. That didn't happen by accident, where we couldn't come up with a technological solution. We came up with a business solution to make it happen, at least on a temporary basis. Multi-protocol. The agencies played with that for years and couldn't happen. There was IP issues. There was, technology issues with interference, and we just made it happen. And that's a lot thanks to our Attorney General's office, and particularly Beth McKay, in backing us on the legal side. So it's, and again, that's engagement across department in order to make that happen. We're moving now toward more open platforms. Forever, toll authorities have used just closed systems, and I'll even call it proprietary. I remember one time I wanted to move an icon from one part of the screen to the other, and they said it was all hard-coded, it would be $1 million. So we're trying to get away from that, and unfortunately, we have to do it in increments because there's not really a place just to jump to. So we're moving to a cloud solution that will interface. We have a great partnership with DMV now. We're working with them. We're going to have a cell phone integration that's more than just an app, right, on that side. We're connecting with the rest of the country, third parties like both of you, or three of you here, and working on the connected vehicle side. So we keep looking for partners to keep moving it forward. So on the open payment initiatives, we're actually working, Pennsylvania put this out with us, and we have 14 states and 19 agencies, and we put out a request for information for a digital payment gateway that will open us up on the payment system side. We expect it to have about 8 or 12 respondents. We have 34. So it's been very popular. The timing is right, I believe. So we want to identify cost-effective payment options now and in the future. You don't want to just look at today, right? This stuff is changing so fast, right? We want to look at what we're going to need in the future so we don't have to keep buying things, right? We want to look at more as a service. I really see in the future, if you see on the graphic here, we have a cash register. Why can't a toll road be like Home Depot, right? Why can't, MasterCard or, a Google Wallet or, maybe Slack comes up with something, right? Apple Pay or whatever, all of them just be part of that payment system, and we just collect the payment. If you have a problem, you hit a pothole or something on our road, which never happens, by the way, but you call us. But you have a problem, you buy a shovel at Home Depot and have a problem, you take it back to Home Depot. If you have a problem with that credit transaction, you call MasterCard, right? So, why can't we eventually get to that? Our cost of collection is way too high. You want to review the interoperable operating agreements we have between all the agencies and how we exchange money and how we exchange time and all that stuff. And I think one of the most important things is, and I'm kind of reading off this because they're all key points, discover products and innovation and payment processing, which is why we're here today, right? We want to move to these innovative payment systems, right? And we want to be able to not only accept payments from everybody, but also different types of currency, on that side. Maybe crypto or whatever, it's coming down the future. So, and then, to keep moving to it, as we looked at the Sirius XM video, integrate with other verticals. So if you're going for a hamburger at one of the hamburger places, by the way, we did a pilot with EasyPass once on that, and we found a little problem in that a bunch of teenagers pulled up to the drive-through and they said, would you like to pay that with your EasyPass? And actually, I think it was in Chicago. And they said, oh, yeah, and the 3 cars behind me. And so when the parents got the bill, it was a little bit of a problem. So, but there's solutions to that, right? So, and which we limited the cost on each one, and put it in the agreement. But, but there's ways to do it. We're trying not to let obstacles stop us on that side. So, let's see. Talked about the gateway. How close are we? We're within 3 minutes of discussion, so I'd rather have questions from the audience than me just stand up here. I hate, that's why we didn't do PowerPoint. People stand up here and pound their chest about how great they are. That's not what we wanted to do. We want to answer questions for you. So, any questions from the audience? Yes. He's got it. Logan?
Thank you. Thank you. This was a great presentation. Nick Norboge, I'm with the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management. Just kind of wanted to ask briefly, and I know you've shared this, but love to hear just 1 or 2 kind of concrete examples of sort of local or regional or even state by state kind of collaboration efforts that you thought, from your perspective, were particularly effective, and maybe a little bit of background on maybe why.
So EasyPass is probably the one that comes to mind first, right? And I won't say EasyPass was easy. because it wasn't, and still in a lot of cases isn't. So that's one. So when South Carolina and Georgia didn't join Easy Pass, Florida didn't join Easy Pass, right? We did collaboration on it by ourselves. We don't have a lot of transactions from either one of them states. So, and it's basically South Carolina was two different agencies. One's a P3, and the other one was a private road that, or the state-run road that's now out of existence. We came up with the non-technical issue. That's the non-technical issue. We came up with the collaboration. I think the payment gateway that we have in the street is a good one. So that was co-written and being evaluated by 19 different agencies in 14 states, right? Actually, there's a meeting on it tomorrow down in Miami. So, that's another collaboration that's going forward. When we worked on multi-protocol transponders, there was a 6C coalition. That's the little sticker tag, but by the way, it's about 30 cents compared to, at the time, the battery one that had a lithium battery, which is an environmental problem, was $21. So there was a cost difference in everything. So the agencies came together, and although they didn't come up with a common transponder because there was so much out there, we came up with a multi-protocol solution. So now we have multi-protocol readers. So there's been more and more in interagency. Us with DMV, right? I see they left. We're working now with, so DMV can actually, take off the registration holds and work on selling some of our transponders and things like that across the way. So, and work out of some of our mobile offices. We're looking at transit. We worked at the ferry system. So there's a lot of different things, both cross-agency within North Carolina and then nationally that we're also working on. And then the other thing we do is collaboration. Our marketing team has regular meetings with marketing across. Our engineering team does the same thing across the world, really, to talk about what other things people are doing. Europe's way ahead of us on all this, whichever piece you ask here, right? And what they're doing and how we're trying to bring it here. So I could probably go on, but.
I can share maybe one example that's more like on the agency side around analytics. So we've been working with the Hawaii Department of Transportation, and one of the things that their director said, hey, right now we have all these different departments that have different data, and people are making decisions based on different information. And he said, I want a place that everybody's making common data-driven decisions across different departments in the agency, across different levels of government, so state, cities, counties, and I want to be transparent with the public and share with the public why we're making the investments and the decisions that we're making. And so that was his vision, because it was very siloed, which is typical for a lot of agencies. There are all these different silos, as I think you were talking about. And so what we've done is help really bring together all this data into a platform, but then also really surface it up in very easy to use and understand ways. Because I think that's part of the challenge, is when it feels like things you have to be like an expert, a GIS expert or a data scientist, or you have to be an expert in this area. It becomes hard to create that collaboration across different stakeholders. And so the idea of that was let's do the work kind of behind the scenes to bring the analytics and the power of the data, but surface it up in a very easy to use way for different stakeholders and across different levels of government.
Yeah, and as agencies, we're being forced to bring in different levels of expertise. For a long time, toll collection started with civil engineering, because we were building, $100 million toll plazas, and the toll system was, pennies on that, basically. So the civil engineering groups got that. That doesn't cut it anymore, because now we're looking at cloud-based systems, data analytics, right, AI, all that stuff, and so we have to bring in a different level of expertise in order to move things forward, and we're working with that, and sometimes that's hard, right? So, anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, this is Radha from RS&H. You used a couple of technical terms. I just want to make sure we understand those. You said something non-card payments. are you referring to things like Zelle, which are more peer-to-peer, and how do they play a role into payments to agencies? And I think, Andy, you referred to something like open card payments, open payments or open card payments, something like that.
Okay.
What's how is that plays a role in this?
We've got 5 minutes. I can tell you everything I've learned in the last 5.5 weeks at MasterCard. So there's various payments. So you've got card present. You physically got the card. You're using the card. Card not present, where it's a case of you might be entering the number online. There's sort of different sort of standards as well. Open loop is, especially when we start talking about transit, it's about sort of using your contactless card as purely as a token to get access to a sort of system. And then we have sort of closed loop varieties as well, where you start looking at, you have the agency holds the value on the account, and it's drawn down, and you have to top that up. So it's the mechanics of how the funds are being moved around more than anything else. And then you can sort of transpose that into sort of the virtual world. So being able to put a digital version of your credit card into your Google phone or your Apple phone into your wallet. So it's about how you sort of create those different tokens again in a digital environment. And everyone comes with a different level of risk. Everyone comes with a different sort of level of processing. And that's probably stretched the limit of my ability on that sort of question in the time frame that we've got. But I'd be happy to sort of point you to Emily, who's sitting over there. She knows everything about payments.
Any other questions? Oh, here's one.
Yeah, just a quick question. With all the information we're gathering in our databases, how do we ensure security of drivers' personal information?
I would say that's a DMV question more than anything else.
And they left. But
go on.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's, as far as when we're kind of working with customers, security is really built into any of, like, the way data is transferred, held. There's things like, where it's encrypted at rest, it's encrypted during exchange. So that's another huge topic, but there's a lot of ways to make sure that the data is secure. And I think right now, I would say probably historically in a lot of agencies, that hasn't been something that has been kind of well thought out often. And so, and we've seen over the last few years, like, these kind of ransomware attacks and things like that, where data is being jeopardized, right, and things are at risk. But, moving to things like cloud-based solutions where a lot of the security is already built into the way every aspect of how the data is ingested, stored, moved. A lot of that technology is already there. And I mean, that's how, as a data company like in Google, that's how we secure our data. And so a lot of the ways that we've built our own cloud-based products have that level of security built in.
I think on the MasterCard side as well, it's, we've sort of transitioned slightly during COVID into sort of cybersecurity and risk analysis of the network and how you manage the data in that instance. And some of the work that our Australian team have been doing, their identity clearance, where they become a clearing house for identity verification. So it's acting as a broker between their equivalent of the DMV and a third party who might need to have age verification to basically say, yes, this person is over 18. You're not actually sharing the information. You're just providing a token that basically says, yes, they're over 18, and yes, they can order a bottle of spirits.
If I could just steal your mic.
Sorry, there we go.
No, and I think, like discussed, I think most SaaS providers are taking care of the baseline things like encryption at rest and transit, all of the various security protocols that you would be looking for to secure that sensitive data. I also think that we're taking a step in the right direction from a government perspective, recently codifying things like FedRAMP into law. I know that's not as mandatory and applicable in the state and local space, but seeing that step forward, I think, is setting the kind of industry standards and trends that we're going to be following in the future, where mature SaaS companies are making sure that they are building out that model and maintaining that compliance from the very get-go, as opposed to playing catch-up.
Well, terrific. What a great panel. I really mean it. This is one of the best panels I've ever moderated or been working with. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming, participating, and coming in. Really, really great. Thank you. So I've been told to tell everybody it's lunchtime, probably in case anybody didn't know. But and you know, don't forget to visit the exhibit hall downstairs. We do have a quick pass booth down there also if you're interested in transponders. So, and aviation booth is really cool. So.